My Brewtools MiniUni Plus setup changed massively during my first year of using them. It changed from this to this and ultimately to this. Especially until I figured out what I really wanted and what parts I needed, it took me a lot of thinking and tinkering to get there. Now that I got it all figured out, here are my 6 biggest upgrades for the Brewtools MiniUni Plus, and you might be surprised because some of them are doable with a very limited budget. I sorted these upgrades from the smallest to the biggest impact on my brewing, starting with number 1, the hop dropper. Even though I don't often brew beers like IPAs or pale ales, I definitely was looking forward to be able to dry hop without introducing oxygen, something I couldn't really do when I was fermenting in kegs. But here's where I scratched my head for a long time to come up with a solution that works for me. I found some very creative builds online, some of which looked honestly a little bit ridiculous to me, but definitely were genuine. Unfortunately, some of these mods required custom welding, which is something I don't want to look into. Also, I think setups like Dan from Hops Gnarly showed in his video are just
super over the top.
Although I will admit it does look impressive. Then I stumbled on a video of Doug from Craft Hardware. He utilizes 2 elbows, a butterfly valve and a side glass for the bottom port. I linked his video in the description so you can take a closer look at it. Again, this just wasn't doing it for me as I didn't want to add so much weight on the bottom, nor I did want to build a frame to support the structure. Sure enough, I could simply get myself the hop drop kit from Brewtools, mount it on top of the tank and call it a day. However, this caused a new problem. Where to put the pressure kit? A buddy of mine from the Netherlands sent me his setup that I thought looked decent and would enable me to keep the pressure kit on top, but without utilizing the liquid post whatsoever. Instead, he uses a racking arm on the lower 1.5 inch front port to get the beer out of the tank. If I were to brew a lot of dry hop beers, I think this would be the way to go. However, I settled on a different approach. I got this 4-inch ball lock tri-clamp lid that has an additional 1.5-inch tri-clamp port on top. On this comes a 1.5-inch to 2-inch adapter where I mount another butterfly valve from Brewtools. The last 2 pieces of my hop dropper are the 2-inch side glass from Brewtools and another 2-inch ball lock lid that I had already lying around. While 2 inches doesn't seem like a lot, it can easily fit 5 ounces or 150 grams of hops at a time, which is plenty for my regular batch size of 5.5 gallons or 21 liters. And for spunning, I simply utilize the gas post of the 4-inch ball lock lid with the good old reliable Kegland spunning valve. It is nothing fancy, but it does the job. Which brings me to upgrade number 2, a sampling valve. Before I had this piece, I usually would mount a faucet to the top of the tank to get a sample of the beer. This isn't so much of a problem as it might seem, but every time you take the tap off the ball lock, it squirts a little beer and it is a bit messy if you ask me. So why not utilize the upper front port of the MiniUni Plus? To pull this off, I started with a 1.5-inch butterfly valve that is permanently mounted on the tank. This enables me to put the sampling valve on and off whenever I feel like it. Another advantage of this solution is you just need to buy one, even if you have several tanks. And you could even use this for racking the beer off the tank as well, especially if you use the racking arm and the lower front port. However, you need an additional 1.5-inch to 34mm tri-clamp adapter as well as the matching tri-clamps and the gaskets. After this comes the sampling valve and the coil to reduce foaming once the beer is carbonated. Now I can just pour a sample from the tank without spilling beer and of course do some quality control. The third upgrade is definitely a huge one for me as it gives you way more flexibility. I am talking about hanging the MiniUnis on the wall. I really can't stress how big of an upgrade that was for me, both technically and optically. Before you start drilling, check if there's any current hiding in the wall. Before you mount your tank on the wall though, make sure the wall can support the weight of the fully loaded unitank. Also, take into account that you either have to place the tank nearby your brewing system or have another way to get the wort into the fermenter and, depending on your packaging routine, out of the tank. Thanks to my buddy Sasha, the installation was relatively easy. Nevertheless, my initial plan to place the tanks next to each other didn't work, as the previous tenants already made big holes into the wall and the plugs weren't really stable. But I actually like how this turned out and how nice my home brewery looks like now. The flexibility that I gained going with this route is huge, as I can design the bottom accessories the way I want, which also helps tremendously with yeast dumping. As I discussed in my previous video, I wanted to optimize this process further, which went great. Now I connected the side glass to the bottom port, after that follows the 90-degree elbow, and on the end I attached the 2" to 34mm tri-clamp adapter with another elbow to 10mm hose barb plate. Now I can easily hold the vessel underneath the barb and the yeast drops into the jar. Another huge advantage is you free up some floor space, which comes in handy if you have only limited room available. And of course, these unitanks hanging on the wall just look awesome. One of the most important things when it comes to brewing is of course cleaning, which brings me to upgrade number 4, a CIP kit. CIP stands for Clean in Place, which comes from the professional brewing world. As fermentation vessels in breweries can be insanely huge and heavy, it is neither possible nor wise to move a tank around to clean it. In home brewing it can be pulled off, but at some point it has no benefit to do that. Especially if you have a fully rigged MiniUni, it can be a pain to move it around in order to clean it. That's where CIP techniques come in very handy. You simply need a pump, a spray ball, and of course a cleaning detergent. In my case, I already had a pump from my other brewing system that utilizes quick disconnects, so I just had to get the 4" CIP spray ball and the matching adapters to connect to the quick disconnects. I will do a full breakdown video on how I clean my unitanks, as I learned there's a lot of things to uncover and even some misconceptions when it comes to CIPing your tanks. Luckily my tank is already cleaned and ready to ferment some wort. And during fermentation the yeast produces a lot of CO2 that we can utilize as brewers. But how are we gonna do that? Well, here comes upgrade number 5 handy, the pressure kit. Although this piece is a little bit cost intensive, I really enjoy using the kit a lot. The setup is simple, it is easy to take apart and thus ensures good cleaning. You can choose between a floating and a stainless steel dip tube. Also, the pressure kit is crucial for getting the beer out of the tank and spunning the beer. Here I really gotta say, the spunning valve is the best I have seen anywhere. It is so precise and gives you a lot of leeway to dial in the pressure right on the money. Another benefit is that you can ferment a little bit warmer once you let the beer ferment under pressure. It suppresses the formation of esters, because the pressure slows down the metabolism by the yeast, just like the colder fermentation temperature does. Speaking of fermentation temperature, the biggest upgrade I did for the MiniUni Plus was getting a glycol system. Again, I can't stress enough how big of a deal this is for me, and let me explain you why. Being able to dial in the temperature of the beer precisely opened a lot of new playgrounds for me. Performing split batches with the same yeast at different temperatures or trying different strains at the same temperature is now extremely easy to pull off. I opted to buy the Icemaster G20 from Kegland, as it has a built-in temperature controller and 2 individual pumps. I really didn't want to mess around with setting up everything by myself, so I think this was the easiest way to go. To connect the MiniUni Plus to the Icemaster, you need the following parts: EVA Python tubing, 2 lines per tank, 4 male quick connector for the glycol lines, 4 female quick connector for the tanks, and additionally some hose clamps for securing the lines on the glycol chiller. Unboxing and setting up the Icemaster was relatively easy, but I plan to do a whole video about it, as I do have some negative thoughts on it. Don't forget to order a gallon of glycol too. Now I can simply dial in the temperature of both tanks and the glycol reservoir, and it stays within 0.5 Celsius or 1 degree Fahrenheit. Also, I can cold crash 2 tanks simultaneously down to 4C or 39F. When I got the glycol system, of course, I needed to brew some lagers, and boy, they came out great. I will post those videos soon, But before that I did also a very nice video about the Mexican hot chocolate stout, a winter warmer, that you can find here.